but in looking at this, I mean, when you're looking at the vision for renewables coming up, is this something that you think Alaska should be pushing forward? Should we be funding this?
We have, you know, maybe this isn't the correct metaphor, but we're the Saudi Arabia of renewable energy. I mean, we've got 90% of America's tidal potential. We're living on the rim of fire. Every time you see one of those volcanoes belch, we ought to think of that as a power surge. We've got incredible river systems that can provide all kinds of in-stream hydro. We've got some great hydro potential. We've got incredible wind. We have some of the best wind in the world here. We ought to be leading in renewable energy. And that's not even talking the biomass that we can do with all these trees that have been killed with spruce bark beetle or any of the other harvestable items. There's incredible potential if we just have leadership. But leadership doesn't go around cutting the investments that we need. Leadership starts to back up the research that required so Alaska can be a world leader and not someone that just says one thing one day and does something the next. I mean, that's an incredible flip-flop if ever I've seen one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was looking, geothermal was cut, hydro cut multiple places, wind cut multiple places.
I don't want to say anything, but the day before all this happened, he had a big fundraiser over at some high-powered donors' houses, and none of their projects got cut. So maybe if we all got together and had a bake sale for renewable energy, we could save it next year.
Is that what it
takes?
takes?
Except for next year, I'm going to be governor, and I'm going to support it.
Well, when I was looking through this, and I know that Sean Parnell has been having fundraisers while this budget was sitting on his desk waiting to get cut. And I have a tremendous problem with that. No one that was in the legislature who happens to be running was able to fundraise while they're working. Mm-hmm. And yet he's been able to do this. It seems like a pretty nasty double standard, to say the least, to say the very least.
Well, it is a huge problem. I mean, it's a problem to have that sword of, I'm going to cut your budget, but at the same time, I'd like you to support my campaign. And
right.
That's cutting on the edge of what's ethically permissible, or what should be on the edge of what's ethically permissible.
Well, we've had, you know, we've had Tundra Barbie, and now we have Caribou Ken. And in looking at these different things that he cut that would give so many smaller communities power, at the same time, he signed a bill to give $71 million to buy jackup drills for the inlet. It seems to me that he's not very far away from his days as working as a lobbyist for ConocoPhillips.
You know, that might be, but it's also a guy who doesn't have a real vision of what the future of the state is. I mean, I got nothing against jackup rigs, but if we're going to do jackup rigs, then we ought to do the hydro, we ought to be doing the geothermal, we ought to be doing the other things as well. Because if Alaska is going to make money from our gas, then we ought to be using the renewable energy that's in our region, because we can't export that. I mean, so just
right.
as a business decision, it doesn't make sense.
So if we were running, you know, Anchorage on geothermal, smaller communities on hydro and wind, and we were able to create the grid that way so that we weren't having to consume and spend a huge amount of money, a tremendous amount of money on heating our homes.
Then
we can export it all, and your dividend gets fatter.
Yes, more money into the permanent fund, bigger dividend, more exports, more jobs.
It seems
it's
like
a question.
no-brainer. Maybe that's the problem.
Perhaps it is.
Well, this is going to be interesting, and I think that you know, today he provided enough fodder for enough communities to really take a look and say, okay, now I know who Sean Parnell is.
And let me tell you, just as a governor, part of the problem he has here is he didn't weigh in when these budgets were being discussed. Had he weighed in and actually had the moxie to take part in the debate that was going on in the legislature and give people in the legislature fair warning of what his thinking was, then these kind of draconian cuts wouldn't have been necessary. And they're not draconian in the sense of the overall budget, but they just come as a surprise to the individual projects that are affected by it. And that, to me, cries out again and again, this guy doesn't have leadership quality.
Well, I don't think that leaders cut health care from children and pregnant women. I don't think a good leader cuts projects like the Uniclete assisted living for elderly people. I mean, we don't have ice flows anymore that we're putting people on when they get too old. We take care of them. And if assisted living, you know, I mean, there's just so many indicators right now that you're right, no vision.
No, it's no vision, no heart. And that's not what Alaska needs at this time. And this isn't a Republican thing, it isn't a Democratic thing, it's about making the right choices for the future. Because if we want to have a quality future, we got to take care of our people, we got to take care of our infrastructure. And this budget doesn't do that. There's no coherence to it, and there's no leadership. And you can't go in with an axe after the budget has been built and say, well, I'm cutting and therefore I'm a budget cutter. This is not a sustainable budget to begin with. It's not a sustainable budget because he didn't demonstrate the kind of leadership he needed to when they were putting it together, when the legislature was doing it. And the consequences are that Alaskans are confused by a guy who inherited the job.
I'm not confused by him.
Well, I hope not. I hope you know where you're going to be in November.
I do, and I'm not on the ballot, thank God.
Yes, I
but
was.
you
I was
are.
relieved about that as well.
Were you? Oh, sweet Jesus. Oh, by the way, we got to wrap up and go to a break, but I wanted to tell you congratulations on all your family values of 10 years of marriage. I understand this week you're celebrating.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I actually want to thank my wife for having the fortitude to stick with me for all these years and for many more, I hope.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how you caught that fish with your bait, but I'm glad you did. I'm just teasing you.
Thanks.
No, she's amazing, and
It's
you are
the
doing.
heat that it's not a blush.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm really glad that you came in.
Thank you, Shannyn.
All right, we'll keep up on this. We'll be right back with more Up North. All right, great. Welcome back. And my thanks to Ethan Berkowitz for coming in. And I'm really happy right now that Donna Maltz has come in. She is the owner, she and her husband, Kevin, of the Sourdough Express Bakery in Homer, Alaska. And she's in town right now. Hardly ever get a chance to. The planets all had to be aligned for you to be here, I think. Yes. And very exciting. You just won Small Business Owners for Alaska for the year, which
Yes.
is fantastic. And I mean, we go back a long time. I think I was 14 when I first met you, and you taught me how to cook.
Yeah.
You have a bakery that's been very successful. It's very sustainable. Mm-hmm.
It's a bakery and a cafe.
A bakery
and
and
you
a
were
cafe.
14 and very sassy. Very sassy.
14 and sassy.
Oh,
I
yeah.
know. I thought that just came with being 14. But you know, back when I started working at the Sourdough in high school, you know, you had this book in the front, and I remember Albert would come in and bring halibut, and then he'd have a credit, and he'd come in and eat his meals, and then so-and-so would bring in eggs, and so-and-so would bring in carrots, and so-and-so would bring in, people were bringing in all sorts of things from the community, and herbs and lettuce and whatever was fresh, crab, all these things, and that you were, the whole community was, well, not the whole community, but so much, the whole part of the bakery was this real commune of resources. How did you come up with that?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's when I had just graduated from college, 6 years of studying organic agriculture and sustainable community development. And when I came to Homer, I fell in love with the community, and I took all of those skills that I had learned and my love for nature and the environment, and figuring, whoa, when I got to Homer, how am I going to stay here in this beautiful community, and what can I give back? And without taking from this environment, how can I make it a better place? And I love to cook and I love to bake, and when I was on my organic farm in Olympia, Washington in the late 70s, early 80s, I was selling my sourdough bread at the farmer's market with my organic produce, and I realized that I could be portable with this. So when we drove up the Alaskan highway, we were towing a 1972 laundry truck was towing a van, a little handmade container filled with everything to make a bread and soup kitchen. And we realized as we drove up the highway in April and it was snowing and blizzarding and the whole works, that we were really truly in the last frontier, and that's where we wanted to be. And that when we baked, every place we stopped, we would bake bread and we'd sell it to make gas money. And we realized, well, we have a business here. And this was a friend of mine, John Hammer, who started it with me back then. And when we got to Homer, we said, we're home. And we lived out on the Homer spit for weeks, and we woke up, we would bake our bread actually out there on the spit and let it rise in the van, in those big windows, you know, those laundry trucks. And then we would drive around town in this little truck, and people would flag us down to buy the bread. And so not only did we know we had a business, you wouldn't have a business without customers. And we realized we were in a community that embraced us and was ready for us. And so we ended up staying in Homer since for 28 years now. And we started with $43. And that was when downtown Homer wasn't even paved, and when you drive from Homer down to the Spit on the bypass,
Right.
there was not one building. It was a canopy of beautiful trees. And I watched the environment dwindling away even in our little town of Homer, and became even more committed and more passionate about the food that we served. How can I speak for the environment? How can we, and all our co-workers, and my husband Kevin, who's joined me in 1984 and has been the backbone